Welcome to the Terrible Podcast with your hosts from SteelersDepot.com, where you can find all your latest and greatest Steelers news. It's Dave Bryan and Alex Kozora, always lit, talking Steelers. And now, here's Dave and Alex.
Welcome to the Terrible Podcast, Season 13, Episode 128. He's Dave Bryan. I'm Alex Kozora, SteelersDepot.com. Thanks for being back with us here this Wednesday, Steelers Nation. And things about to ramp up for the NFL and for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Their rookie minicamp will begin this Friday and run through Mother's Day on the 14th. And my favorite time of year is upcoming. The NFL schedule release will officially occur tomorrow at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, although there should be leaks coming out throughout the day and already some select games announced by the league on Wednesday. So, Dave, how you doing?
Doing good, and we're fixing to get into an interesting weekend here, as you just highlighted with the schedule being announced, and already got the international games out today, and they've dropped a couple. Let's see, what we got: Christmas, we got a Christmas game, we know a New Year's Eve game, and
Black Friday game,
a Black Friday game too, as well, on top of it. So I have started the that annual kind of grid where you block out where you know it's not that helpful. It just gives you something to do, and you try to beat the actual schedule release out. And obviously there will be some leaks that hit over the course of the next before the schedule drops Thursday night. The problem is you don't know which one of those leaks are, how much water, because there's so many fake accounts out there and all like that. Yeah. But
this is going to be even worse without the blue checks. We're going to have to be really, really careful of these things.
Yeah, and then on top of it, something to be excited about. Obviously, the Steelers rookie minicamp getting underway on Friday there.
Also, later in today's show, we have a Depot Draft Roundtable with the Joes, Joe Clark and Joe Camaroto, Owen Straley, and Tom Meade. And so they will join us here in just a little bit to give their thoughts and their takes on the Pittsburgh Steelers 2023 NFL Draft. So let's briefly start with the schedule release that we know right now. Do you like the schedule release? Because everyone knows that I despise it. It's my least favorite part of the entire calendar. Or you seem to enjoy it, I guess, just from a figuring it out standpoint and getting the answer standpoint.
Yeah, I like playing the guessing game along with everybody else more than it. I like the process of filling in those blocks, I guess. Don't ask me why. It's like I guess it's like a Blue's Clues, and you're trying to compete to see how much of the actual schedule you can know before it actually drops. So I think that's the most fascinating thing to me. And then obviously the immediate post schedule drop of, what looks fair, what doesn't look fair, what's going to be challenging, where's the bye week, just the little things. Overall, look, I mean, it's no secret who this team's going to play, right? We've known that since the season dropped. So I do admit that I get caught up a little bit in maybe I get caught up in the excitement of other people's excitement, if that makes sense.
Fair enough. I don't want to rob you of your excitement. It's just, for me, if I got to hear about strength of schedule one more time, I'm going to scream, just because it does not matter. By week 4 of 2023, no one's going to talk about what the 2022 strength of schedule was. Throw all of that out the window, because each season is so unique and so different. So that's the kind of stuff that just drives me crazy.
All right, we got some breaking news to go with here. The Steelers have informed Arthur Maulet the team is being released.
Okay. Yeah, Dave, that is big news and surprising news at that. We just had the conversation on the roundtable, which we recorded before we're recording our segment, me and you, and talked about Maulet and talked about the slot position and the uncertainty there. So obviously Maulet was not going to be the 3-down, pass-down slot corner, but I thought he brought value in terms of that rundown nickel role. So there's even more questions about this team slot corner situation now.
I did not have Arthur Maulet on my pre-OTA cut list bingo card.
Right.
I had a Kella Witherspoon on that card. This is an interesting move here, especially as you indicated, as we've talked about for a while. What is this team going to do? At slot corner, and obviously they did sign Chandon Sullivan recently, and it's going to be interesting to watch this play out. And as people will hear, as we've talked about, as they'll hear in the roundtable, maybe the plan is to play Patrick Peterson inside and move him around.
It seems to be looking more and more likely, but how good of an idea is that? What growing pains could come with that? I don't know. I mean, it just feels like a big mess for me right now. And so the longer we go along in the off season here, the more questions I have about what this team's plan is at slot corner. And I understand, people will say, well, they have a plan. They know what they're going to do. And I'm sure they have something in mind. But again, I go back to just 2021 when their plan was pretty crappy and it really hurt them early in the season. And at this point, it's looking even more confusing right now.
And look, let's say Maulet's not in your plans, right? $1.79 million in cap savings prior to roster displacement. So I think, let's see, what's the bottom of the rule of 51 right now? About a $940,000 cap charge there. So subtract 940,000 from the 1.79. I mean, you don't save any money, any real cap money there. So
do you think he asked for his release? Do you think he saw writing on the wall and just said, I want to go somewhere else?
It's quite possible. It's quite possible. It just look, I mean, nothing wrong with the overall decision, especially if you deem him not in the plans. But we're not talking like you're going to save $4 million here in cap space either. So it's one of those things that becomes quite interesting more because of the timing than anything, I think.
Right, because, Maulet was very specific in what he did, but he was an effective, run down, 1st and 10 slot type of corner that could blitz a little bit and attack the run in that Mike Hilton type mold. Couldn't cover, but, that's what he could do, just kind of a very small linebacker. So now the question is, who's going to be that guy, in addition to who's going to be the third down, obvious pass situation, slot corner, aligning over number 2 over slot receivers. And maybe that's going to be Peterson as the answer to everything. But at that point, you're asking a 33-year-old corner that's been on the outside his entire career to, transition to a new position. I know he's a smart guy, a veteran guy. It's going to be less of a curve for him than others, but with declining physical tools and it is a new position. If that's the plan, that's asking a lot. Now, if it's Chandon Sullivan as the answer, there's issues there because he really struggled last year. So I don't know what this team's doing.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to watch this play out even more so now at this point. So quite a way to start off a Wednesday podcast, right?
Yeah, I mean,
especially as we just had a talk for about 15 minutes and talked about the slot options, and now there's one less. Officially or not officially yet. The Steelers haven't announced this move, but according to Ian Rappaport here, but this is going to happen. So anyway, something else to look forward to watch play out the rest of this offseason.
We'll have to go back in and dub over our commentary of the podcast. So whenever Owen speaks, I'll put on my Owen voice and dub over his commentary on the slot position. So yeah, the news never stops in Pittsburgh, and this is more roster churning from Omar Khan and Andy Weidel, and this roster's going to feel a whole lot different.
I was thinking that last night, man. I was thinking, man, this 53, and it needs to look different.
Sure,
Yeah. But when we finally get to the point where we're looking at this week 1 53-man roster. And look, you obviously normally have about a third of a churn anyway. It it might look more than a third of the churn here by the time this is all settled and done with. I was thinking that last night, man, this is going to be a lot different looking roster, overall. And coming out of the draft, we said that cornerback room looked a little heavy, right? By one, but once again, I did not have Arthur Maulet on my bingo card as a May 10th veteran release.
It was looking heavy on the outside because you have all these big, long outside corners and Peterson and Porter and Trice and Wallace and Pierre and Witherspoon. The inside felt light, so they're subtracting for it where it feels light. I mean, Maulet might have been getting squeezed this summer, but what if an injury occurs, something happens like that? I just not sure, unless he just went to, Tomlin and Kahn and said, I want to go, but he's the kind of guy that, and also he was good. He was a good presence on that team, good energy, good locker room guy. Right. I mean, I liked what he brought from that kind of leadership and tangible standpoint. So not really sure what's going on here, Dave.
Yeah. Well, what a surprise.
All right. So we'll transition now to some tryout players with the rookie minicamp coming up. And usually we don't know the whole tryout list. We're getting pretty close to knowing basically all the minicamp invites that are going to be attending Pittsburgh this weekend. Let me pull up the full list here. We have another name that was added late last night in a corner from Memphis in Sylvanta Oliver. He's from Memphis. He's a slot corner. I think he's like 5'9", $170. He had 3 picks last year, so he'll be in camp on an invite basis. Other names that we need to mention are Darian Bryant from Virginia Union. He was a Temple kid that went to Townsend and then Virginia Union. Zach Gill from Temple. Mike Panasuk from the XFL. Pittsburgh had brought him in for, I think, multiple visits. He's a former D tackle that converted to center and I think had a pretty good year in the XFL. And maybe
I named him in maybe a guy that the Steelers would look at in that recent center attention post that I did, thinking that, if they were to look at any of these centers coming out of the XFL, maybe he would be one of them. So it looks like he's going to get a look this weekend. Okay.
Good call by you. Like, just go sign this guy. They've looked at him so many times. Either you like him or you don't, but I guess you'll obviously get the weekend to really view him. And then I think for Steeler fans, the most notable name and story that I'm sure will get written about in the papers this weekend is Maverick Wolfley. And if that name sounds familiar, he is the nephew of Craig Wolfley, the former Steelers offensive lineman, who of course now does the radio commentary and has that very unique presence and voice for Steelers Nation radio. He's a kind of H-back tight end from West Florida. He's a multiple transfer guy as well. He, I think, initially committed to West Virginia, never played there, went to Akron, had some success there, and then transferred last year to West Florida. And so he'll be a notable name on an invite tryout basis in minicamp.
And he's also the grandson of
Ray Mansfield, right?
Ray Mansfield as well too. So interesting link there. UWF, that's from my neck of the woods, University of West Florida there in Pensacola, Florida. So, I know right where that campus and that school is, but obviously didn't know he was playing there. And he does look more like a kind of an H-back, fullback, undersized tight end option.
Speaking of fullbacks, we had kind of a lighthearted, but it's also kind of serious discussion about Kendrick Green last night. And this stems from a tweet that I guess that Vince Williams had about wanting to make Kendrick Green a fullback, something you suggested. Was it last year?
2021. I think okay. November of 2021. It was becoming very obvious at that point that Kendrick Green was having some struggles at the NFL level. And one of the more positive things that I think Kendrick Green had shown during his rookie season was his ability to move out in space and straight line move and be able to physicality and all like that. And I threw out there, Kendrick Green would make one hell of a fullback. And Vince Williams seems to think the same, according to a couple of tweets that he put out here the last couple of days here. Look, we normally laugh at, people suggesting you move this guy around, move that guy around and all like that. But I got to be honest with you. It would not hurt my feelings at all if they got to OTAs and said, "Hey, look, we're gonna take a look and see what maybe Kendrick Green can do at fullback." This guy is. I mean, let's be honest here. he's long for the roster, right?
Right.
A lot of things I think would have to happen for Kendrick Green to make the 53-man roster this year. So before you completely blow him out the door, why wouldn't you give him a chance to maybe show what he can maybe do at another position? I mean, odds are obviously he wouldn't stick or anything like that, but you never know. And this team, God bless Connor Hayward, but he has yet to show that he can be, that bang him up the middle type fullback. And we're all obviously excited to see what Monty the Mullet can do as an undrafted free agent here. I doubt they take all of our advice here, but I would not be dissatisfied if news came out that Kendrick Green was getting some fullback snaps.
Let me walk me through this a little bit. Okay, I don't know exactly what Kendrick Green's weight is right now. Let's just call it 305 pounds. What weight would he have to be? I imagine he's not playing fullback at Free Bills.
Yeah, I would think he'd have to at least get down to 285 or something. And that's even probably what did Rosie play at? Rosie Nix, 248 or something? Do you remember?
I mean, I imagine the way the fullbacks get listed and the way they actually play are probably pretty dramatically different. So I can tell you what his weight was coming out, but I don't really know how much it's gonna. And he was like an inside linebacker. I mean, he was 248 at his pro day in 2014, but who the heck knows what he actually was in the NFL?
And look, obviously, he's not going to drop all that weight that quick and all like that. But I mean, if your intentions were, here's the fullback, we're running right at you. You better buckle it up. We're going to out physicality you. Then why couldn't he play at 290? Once again, this is a conversation piece, and it stems from the couple of tweets and we're having fun with it more than anything. And more than anything, you guys got me fired up quite a bit thinking back to that draft now and how surprised we were Kendrick Green was the pick. And then, fast forward in through his rookie season on in to him not playing last season there. If you want to try to at least give this guy any kind of a chance to maybe showcase something, it probably should be at fullback. And once again, is that likely to happen? No, but it does make for a little bit of a fun conversation, I think.
Do you think, could he catch the ball? Like, could he play on special teams? Or is he just going to be pure lead blocker, which is such a niche thing to do?
I don't know. How would Kendrick Green look as the up back on blocking for the returner on a kickoff team?
Slow. I think he would look for. I think the returner would run past him.
He might crack a skull or two along the way, though. But if that would probably be about his fit.
Yeah,
he's not going to be. Now, here's the one thing about Rosie Nix, and you obviously pointed this out quite a few times over the course of his career. That guy was hell on wheels coming down the field on special teams,
Yeah, you want to talk skullcrackers. He has that hit. I always get the name wrong. It was Ben Feeney. It was some Raiders linebacker that he destroyed on it, like the hardest hit I've ever seen on a touchback. Right.
We've probably spent way too much time on this topic already, but and once again, it's lack of kind of things to talk about. Thankfully, we had some Maulet news to fill some time with there. But I think it's just amusing, especially go back to 2021. I had that tweet out there saying they should move him to fullback. I guess some sort of minor validation there overall. But once again, I'll be surprised if you see it.
I would keep him at his size and play O-line, but you could try him at fullback on a goal line package. I mean, they did that with Legursky, the Bronco package they had way back when. I mean, just to do something different. So I think you keep him at his size if you just to kind of be that, occasional blocker. If you wanted to me, if you want to get super crazy and just super wild, he was a defensive tackle in like high school and to start his Illinois career before flipping to O-line. I mean, and he's a strong guy. I mean, he's kind of stout and there's leverage there. So if you want to flip him back to D tackle, I mean, the odds of it working are still really low, and he's got, short arms and all that. But I think, he does not work well in Pat Meyer's system. We all agree upon that. So it's just not a good scheme fit. So maybe flip him on the other side of the football and see how he looks taking on blocks as opposed to dishing out blocks.
Well, here's my concern with that. You know, what was one of the main things that we pointed out right out of the chute with him coming out of college and really saw in those first 3 or 4 games with the Steelers there, his ability to stay on his feet, you know.
Sure.
And I think you would potentially see those same things on the defensive side of football. The only reason talking about with him and fullback is once if he was able to get off the line and get out in space and with that kind of that lower center gravity of his and look, he's got a mean streak to him as well too. And he's looking to put somebody on the ground regardless. I mean, that matches up good with a fullback role when you're not having to play in tight quarters there, you know,
and he's athletic, like just pure athleticism. He's really impressive.
You know, he's a point in the direction kind of guy.
For sure.
Wind him up and let him go. But anyway, fun conversation.
Yeah, we'll move on now. Let's see what else there's to talk about. Not a lot else. Bill Cowher was the guest this week on Big Ben's Footbahlin podcast. And, you know, when Ben gets those marquee guests, they're really good interviews. They're really fun conversations. And the quality of the podcast has always been, to me, top notch from an audio visual standpoint. What was maybe the biggest thing that Coach Cowher said that stuck out to you during that, I don't know, hour 45 conversation, Dave?
First and foremost, great podcast. If you haven't listened to it, get over there. And, you know, I'll reiterate what I've said in the past about that. I could care less about the beer drinking and the food eating on there, probably much in the way people could care less about my stuttering in this podcast. But if you remove all that stuff from Ben's podcast as a whole, week in and week out, it's a great show, especially some of the guests he's had on recently as well too. Main takeaway, man, there was Cowher still got it, man. Cowher is still very entertaining, and it is. You see him in kind of a more formal setting over the years in on the CBS set and all like that. It's good to see Bill Cowher let his hair down. Very, very entertaining and had me cackling on a few things that he had said throughout it as well too. Kidding Ben about the Troy Polamalu not sticking with the cards in practice and all like that, and then telling his version of what happened in leading up to the 2004 draft and all, and about how if Roethlisberger did, they weren't sure Roethlisberger would fall to them at 11th overall there, but if they did, he thought that he should be the guy. And just hearing him tell the stories about once they got him into camp and saying, man, he's bigger than even I thought he was, and he can move, and just so many great tiny stories within that entire interview.
Yeah, there were probably too many to count, but to basically summarize Cowher's take on the 2004 draft was they were going to take an offensive lineman, specifically Shawn Andrews, unless one of those top quarterbacks fell. And they were pretty confident Eli was not going to fall. They felt like there was a chance that Rivers or Ben could fall. And if one of those guys did, they were going to take, the quarterback that was there. Failing that, they were going to take Shawn Andrews. So that's kind of, I guess, where the whole story, because in Dan Rooney's book, he had talked about how he kind of tried to pivot this team away from Andrews and more towards Ben. We may never know the exact truth of it all, but that's Cowher's perspective of it, of it was quarterback if somebody was there. If not, then Shawn Andrews.
Right. And him talking about how, obviously there were probably some coaching options after leaving the Steelers, and he just, that's Yinzer. What do we call that? Yinzer catnip, saying he couldn't see himself coaching anywhere other than the Steelers, and just so many great stories within that podcast there.
Yeah, so you guys should go ahead and check it out. I thought it was interesting. He talked about, Cowher did, that there was really no relationship there with Chuck Noll, and once Noll left, it was a pretty clean break. And once Bill Cowher, stepped down, it was a pretty clean break from Pittsburgh as well. What do you think happens when Mike Tomlin hangs up the whistle at some point? Do you think he kind of removes himself from Pittsburgh the way that Cowher and Noll did? I feel like Tomlin's going to be more tied to Pittsburgh. Obviously Cowher is very much tied to Pittsburgh, literally being born here, but I feel like Tomlin's going to have a bigger presence on the city still.
Yeah, he's got to be in some sort of post-football media world, whatever that looks like. I think he's too good, I think, to not have in some sort of setting. I guess, are you asking me, would he coach somewhere else?
No, I guess I'm trying to figure out, I guess, what exactly I'm asking. But obviously, once Snow left Pittsburgh, there was really no reunion in Pittsburgh. There was really nothing that tied him back to Pittsburgh. And then once Cowher, stepped down, he moves to New York, and obviously he's still revered in Pittsburgh, and I'm sure still came back to Pittsburgh. But there wasn't really any feeling. You didn't really see Cowher in Pittsburgh anymore, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Whenever Tomlin is done coaching, do you think you'll still see him as a presence in that Pittsburgh community still?
I think probably from a charity standpoint, most definitely. I think you'll see that. I don't think he would want his shadow to be too large on whoever's after him either. So I think I think he would keep his distance to some degree. Maybe not to the degree that Cowher has, but and who knows what the media podcast video sphere will look like, whenever that happens and all. But I could definitely see him having some sort of a visual or audio presence, and obviously some sort of charity and outreach presence or something along those lines.
And probably a podcast, like everybody else who walks away from football goes and gets a podcast.
Right. Quite possibly, for sure.
All right, Dave. Anything else you want to talk about? Any other? I had a quick article this morning, and I think some people, are pushing back on it. My premise is just that, I think Broderick Jones is still the favorite to be the week 1 left tackle. I think Dan Moore is going to give this guy a really good fight, and I think Jones is going to have his own issues, just given the rawness that he, showed being a 19-game, basically 1-year starter at Georgia, and then just the learning curve of Pat Meyer's system. We have to go back and think about the learning curve it was for the entire front 5 last year, even more veteran established guys like James Daniels. And they really struggled last year initially learning the nuances in the different techniques of Pat Meyer's more aggressive pass setting system. And I think you combine those two things. I just don't want to rule out and just hand Broderick Jones the job in week 1. I think Dan Moore is going to give this guy a pretty good camp battle.
Yeah, but I think when you look at the bar that he has to exceed here, the biggest I guess downside right now with Broderick Jones is just the lack of experience coming out of college. And but all that said, I don't think the bar is very hard to clear when it comes to Dan Moore. Am I going to sit up here right today and say, I guarantee you Broderick Jones is going to be the week 1 starter? But as a sub to that, I will not be in the least way shocked if he is. I think he will be given every opportunity to win that week 1 job. I don't think it's maybe as much of a struggle against Dan Moore as maybe what you may be trying to present for. But I mean, without a doubt, Moore's been in here now a couple of years, right? And he does have that experience, and he will, he's not just going to lay down for this to happen either. So, obviously, as we say all the time, these things have a way of working themselves out. But I guess long story short is I really do like Broderick Jones' chances of being the week 1 starter.
I get that. And again, he's the favorite. I just think Moore has a better chance than people. I think people are so just out of hand dismissing Moore and just saying, well, Jones will start. He's the 1st round pick. He's the ultra talented athletic left tackle. And he is all of those things. But I think Moore has a better chance than people are giving him credit for.
Okay. Fair enough.
All right, Dave.
And look, this team, we said it several times. This team was very lucky as far as injuries on that offensive line goes. And they know that. They've said as much during the press conferences there. So the odds of you having whoever your week 1 5 starters are playing the outrageous amount of percentage of snaps that they played in 2022 is asking a lot just in general. So several of these guys, it's good that they have addressed depth quite handily on this offensive line this offseason. You're going to see, probably eight guys or so probably at a minimum get snaps there just because of the odds,
Yeah, they got so fortunate and so lucky with how healthy they were. I mean, to have the same starting five for all 17 games, that will not happen again in 2023. So this team understands that, and they've added quality depth to protect themselves against that.
Okay.
All right, Dave, we'll take a pause here and come back with our Depot Draft Roundtable with the Joes, with Owen, and with Tom Mead. So we'll take a pause and come back with them. And welcome back to the Terrible Podcast. And as we mentioned at the top of this show, we're bringing back our Steelers Depot Draft Roundtable a little bit after the 2023 NFL Draft, but gave us all time to really digest the picks and go more in depth on the actual selections that Pittsburgh made during late April's draft. So for today's roundtable, some familiar faces and voices for you guys and Owen Straley. Also joining us is Joe Camarotto, Tom Mead, Joe Clark, and Dave, of course, is here as well. So we'll go ahead and just jump right on into things. Tom, I want to start with you. It's a very big picture question to ask, and I normally don't try to ask them so broadly, but I'll do it to start the conversation. Just your overall thoughts on the Pittsburgh Steelers 2023 draft class.
It was an exciting draft class. We didn't know exactly what to expect with Omar Khan and how he was going to run things, but he showed he was willing to move around the draft board a bit. They showed they were willing to take some chances on guys who might have injury issues. They got over the Jermaine Stevens curse and went with a tackle in the first round. There's a whole generation of kids out there who have never seen the Steelers draft a tackle in the first round.
Truly the biggest thing they were being deprived of from their childhood was the lack of a tackle.
Absolutely. So, yeah, overall, on paper, it looks fabulous. It looks like a great group they got, and I'm excited to see what happens. Obviously, it could go either way. That's how every draft is. But from the looks of it right now, it seems like a big positive moving forward.
Yeah, I'm with you, Tom. Joe Clark, just same question to you. Your overall thoughts, or maybe more specifically, what was your favorite part of this draft for the Pittsburgh Steelers?
My favorite part was probably day two. I mean, I don't think any of us expected Joey Porter Jr. to be there at number 32. So when he was, that was pretty exciting. And then it was the will they or won't they in terms of trading out, or will they? I think pretty much everybody expected if they sit in that spot that he would be the pick. So it was kind of fun monitoring right up until 7 o'clock, whether they were going to take him and keep him in Pittsburgh, or, trade back and get more picks. And then I love the Keanu Benton pick. I know you were all over him way back in January. I remember, I think it was when we were at the Shrine Bowl, watching your video breaking down why he'd be a perfect fit for the Steelers. And then, I mean, Darnell Washington, getting him that late, still trading back, getting the extra pick and getting him. I mean, he's my favorite pick of the draft. I kind of would have taken him at 32, honestly. I mean, obviously the medicals were concerned, but just talent alone. So that was definitely my favorite part. I mean, that was so fun to watch.
Joe, let's see, the two Joes and Owen. And by the way, I want to shout out. We had a little bit of fun with this before we started recording here. Owen Straley is now a college coach, so he's told us that we don't have to call him Coach Straley anymore. But so proud of Owen. He's been with the site and does fantastic breakdown. So I just want to give him some public acknowledgement there for getting his first coaching job. So with that, Owen, Joe Camarotto, and Joe Clark, you three were obviously out here in the Shrine Bowl, and I'll start at the back end. The last selection of Spencer Anderson out of Maryland. There, I believe he was at the Shrine Bowl. What do any of you remember about him being at the Shrine Bowl there?
Yeah, so me and Josh focused a lot on the offensive lineman. He wasn't a guy that really popped as being he's like a Juice Scruggs was a guy who I would say he popped. He's really impressing today. Tony Lamafi too. So he wasn't one of those guys who, really jumped off the page, but he was just solid. Like his one-on-one reps, he wouldn't blow guys back, but he wouldn't really let guys by him. He was just kind of he was stout. He was solid. He never really got beat. He impressed against the top guys. Yeah, I remember I was watching Jose Ramirez a lot because I was big on him, and Anderson had a really nice rep against him. He wasn't a guy that like you walked away like blown away from, but there certainly wasn't anything real like, oh, this guy's not going to be a player in the league. He was getting him in the 7th round. I think is like good value, probably right where he should be. Have an opportunity, in a backup role coming in as a rookie. He was just, I'll say it again. He was solid. He was just all around. He was pretty good. It was on. So I like that selection a lot, especially given his versatility.
All right, Joe C.
To be honest, I didn't watch a lot of the offensive linemen, so I didn't really get to notice him much. I watched more of linebackers, wide receivers, and cornerbacks. But from our conversations, I mean, he came up as a player who was like Joe Clark said, good, but not someone who blew us away.
I know you mostly paid attention to the defensive backs overall, so you probably didn't get a chance to focus too much on Spencer Anderson, right?
Yeah, I was primarily watching DBs and receivers, a little bit of tight ends and backers, but kind of letting Joe and Josh focus more on the front 7 guys. So I'd take their word for it more than anything.
All right, tell the people real quick about your new job, Owen, real quick.
Yeah, so I'll try not to spend too much time on it, but graduate assistant coaching job, be coaching outside linebackers at Springfield College, and cool enough, they kind of run a similar defense to Pittsburgh with a little bit, they got like some different nickel packages and sub packages and stuff, but it's base 3-4. They run a similar enough coverage package to what you see in Pittsburgh. So I think this sort of prepared me for that. So thankful for that.
All right, let's stay with Owen here. You've got the most work ahead of you post draft here with the Steelers drafting 2 cornerbacks in, obviously Joey Porter Jr. and Corey Trice Jr. out of Purdue. You've already done pretty extensive breakdowns, I know, on Joey Porter Jr. Up on the site already in some film rooms, and I think you've started some stuff on Corey Trice Jr. as well too. Tell the listeners what they're getting in these 2 guys.
Yeah, so start with pre-draft. I had Porter Jr. as the 4th overall prospect in the class, and then had Trice, I think 13th. I'd have to check on that again. It might have been 12th, but again, this is kind of before all the medical and whatnot came in on that. But I'll start with Porter Jr. He was a guy that, again, just from kind of hearing the discourse on other people, I thought Banks was kind of rising late. I didn't really know what I would think when I got into his tape, but I mean, overall, I think he had a much higher like floor and higher current ability than I had thought from people. I think he's kind of described as sort of raw in some cases. I actually think his approach and press coverage is pretty sound. He's actually got pretty good feet at the line of scrimmage. Obviously, the length allows him to get in and disrupt. And then kind of a focus of my piece with him is he's very likes to play on the top shoulder a lot more than the low shoulder. And you find a lot of corners where they either kind of like playing from the receiver's hip or playing from this receiver's upfield shoulder. And particularly with his length, when he plays from that upfield shoulder, he can kind of suffocate at the top of routes. He does a pretty good job of, turning through receivers, playing through the hands. So what you get from that technique, you're going to get a lot less, interception, takeaway ball production, because it's hard. Naturally, you have to work through the receiver as opposed to, kind of look up, high point the ball. But in that case, he also does not give up a lot of explosive plays, didn't give up a touchdown last season, and overall looked very good in the snaps that he was in press coverage. Off man definitely needs a little bit of work, opens the hips early sometimes, and isn't exactly the most fluid in terms of changing direction from that. Really liked what I saw in zone from him. I think, naturally can kind of get looked off at times by quarterbacks, but he's a young corner. That stuff happens. I think his processing's good, and he has a natural feel for baiting and jumping routes in cover 2, which, Pittsburgh runs at a decent rate. So I think that's a skill that we'll like. And then obviously, you've seen clips all over Twitter with the tackling is a huge plus, and he's very consistent in that area. I think he's a big hitter coming downhill, but he also does a phenomenal job of just being a reliable open field tackler. And, you can read guys like Bill Belichick's thoughts on it. Having defensive backs who can consistently tackle in the open field is one of the most important things to having a good defense in the league. Moving into Trice, and I just got into him more recently. I think the thing that stood out to me is a lot of people are going to, it's easy to compare the two because of the consistency and the arm length, the physicality, the press coverage ability. I think the big difference you get with Trice is we kind of talk about that top shoulder, low shoulder. He actually tends to play a little bit more from the low shoulder. And what do you get from that? You get higher ball production. He's pretty good at, completing catches, creating takeaways at the catch point. I actually think he has a better feel in zone coverage at the moment than Joey Porter. But in terms of his raw press coverage ability, he's got a really strong punch at the line of scrimmage. When he connects with that, he can get receivers out, force them into wide releases. However, Porter Jr. has a bit of a false step. Corey Trice just really does not move his feet very well in press coverage. They go flat every time he shoots that two-hand jam. So I think that's something that you're going to have to work out of him at the next level. And then off man, he actually, I thought, looked pretty fluid from what I've seen so far, but he gave up more explosive plays, more deep balls, had more zone coverage lapses than Joey Porter from what I saw. Tackling department, similar. I mean, he's a very, very good open field tackler, very impactful hitter when he's coming downhill. I think Alex had an interesting point. I think there's potential. My conclusion was that there's potential for him to maybe be a guy you can match up on tight ends, maybe be a guy that, down the line you can use in some like dime backer type work. So I think there's potential there to move him around a little bit. I think regardless of the injuries, whereas I think Porter's a guy you can slide into sub packages, potentially even start day one and get decent results. I think you might have to wait a little bit on Trice and just kind of work out some of those nuances.
You sort of answered it, Owen, but I was going to ask you the question of, do you think he sticks at corner? I know Pittsburgh's going to start him there. In my pre-draft evaluation, I had the thought he might go back to safety, or as you kind of mentioned, some sort of, sub-package type interior player over tight end, some sort of dime backer-ish type of role, because he was a safety before 2019 when Purdue moved him down the corner. I just kind of questioned, did the long speed really match on tape? And maybe there was a little bit of tightness there because he's that, leaner, longer type of frame. Do you think he can stick at corner? Or basically the question is, what does he have to do in order to stick at corner and not start moving around this defense?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it depends on a couple different things. Do you need him? Like the right away, Levi and Patrick Peterson and Joey Porter, if they're really holding down the fort and, there's not really snaps for that fourth corner, but he's showing you something there. Maybe you find ways to get him on the field in that respect. I think he's going to be a really good special teamer. Absolutely. I think he gives good effort there, but I don't know. It's tough for me because I don't necessarily think he has, like that Minka range in, the post. I guess who does, but I also don't know if he really fits as like a strong safety traditionally either in like an Edmonds role. But I kind of think, as we had talked about, put him in sub packages. And I think you could do some stuff with him in terms of matching tight ends. Probably don't want him matching slots, but I think there's some blitzing potential there. So I think we'll see, but what I said is, he's not a guy that you should be comparing to Porter Jr. They're very different players. One is far more refined, but to get him in the 7th, I think there's undeniable value there, even if he doesn't stay at corner.
Yeah, I'm with you there. Tom, I want to go back and, hey, let's talk about the first pick of the draft here in Broderick Jones and trading up from 17 to 14 to get him A, how surprised were you by that move from Omar Khan? And B, your thoughts on Jones, the player?
I was not surprised. I think I had a feeling that Khan would go up and get a guy that he wanted if he didn't have to move that far. Jones was deemed higher on the board earlier in this draft process, but he started to move down a little bit right into the Steelers' range. So being able to take a fourth rounder and move up a few spots to jump over the Jets was not only a smart move, but the right move. As a player, he's still growing into his abilities. You know, I think he's only a 1-year starter. He's basically only played the left tackle, but has played right tackle in practice often. He's still learning the position. He's growing into it. He gives the competition to both starting tackles right now. And if everything works out, you know, he could be a guy who's a 2-contract starter for the team at left tackle, which, it's something they've lacked since Alejandro Villanueva has moved on. So I was excited by the pick. I think it was the right way to go. And, you know, he could be a building block to add to the outside of that offensive line they're really trying to make a strength of this team.
Tom, what when you flipped on more in-depth tape on Broderick Jones, what was the first thing that jumped out to you about him?
Athletic ability. He can move. He's long. He can move. You get him out in space, and you fear for the defensive backs and the linebackers outside there because he'll just run them over. His flexibility to play both sides is nice, but that left tackle, you really want the athletic guy who's got good feet, can move really well, who can not only protect up the arc, but jump outside and cut off that wide 9 as well. So I think his athleticism exceeds the 2 guys they have on roster right now. So that's what I like the best.
What was the thing that you turned on the tape and you said, that you identified right away? He probably needs to work on X.
Probably hand usage. I think in college they can get away with a lot of stuff. There's a lot of holding in college that doesn't get called. So I think his punch timing and hand usage, the placement, edge rushers in the NFL are a different breed than what he's seen most of the time in college. So there's going to be some work there, but all the building blocks are there for him to be able to execute at a high level.
Joe Clark, I'll go to you and let's kind of start moving to the draft here. Talk about some of the day 2 guys. You mentioned that you were a big fan of what Pittsburgh did day 2 with Keanu Benton and Darnell Washington. Your thoughts on those 2 selections?
Yeah. So, Benton, he's, as you've laid out multiple times, he's exactly what Pittsburgh looks for with his size and his traits. He's gonna be able to take on multiple blockers. He'll be a force in the run game. I've saw a lot of stuff about people saying, "Oh, he doesn't have a lot of pass rush juice," and maybe he doesn't have a ton. And he won't be. He's not going to be a double digit. I don't think he'll be a double digit sack guy in the NFL. But he had 4.5 sacks last year. He has a little bit of juice. I think more than people give him credit for. He's just kind of the perfect complement on Pittsburgh's defensive line right now. That is looking better and better by the day. They did good to add depth in Fehoko and Watts, brought back Larry O, and now adding Benton. That's a pretty solid group. And then obviously Washington fell. The medicals with a big guy like that. There's gonna be concerns about his knees, whether or not he's had prior history or not, just because the only way you can bring him down is to go kind of chop down at him and bring him down by his knees. But just the way he blocks is just, you pop on the tape and just watch him block. It's just fun to watch. He's just a big physical athletic guy. You saw it when he moved the sled at the combine, just how effortlessly he moved that. And tight ends, that's not something that tight ends do. And I think, he offers a little bit of upside in the passing game, too. I don't know if we necessarily see that as much his rookie year, but, as seasons go on, I think he can be a little bit more involved in the passing game when he's a red zone threat. That pick was, I love that pick. I was so happy when they were able to move back and still get him. And then obviously, Porter Jr. Owen talked about he could be a day one starter. If you get a day one starter, that slot and the guy, that can develop, that's obviously going to be an awesome pick. But, just taking two guys that, kind of really fill like a big role. And, Benton, he's going to be a dog on the defensive line, and Washington can be that number 2 tight end, help him in 12 personnel this year, and just, be basically a 6 offensive lineman, like his nickname says. You got to love getting those two guys on day 2.
When it comes to Pittsburgh's first pick on day 3 with Nick Herbig, I want to ask the whole room here. And Owen, I'll start with you. Just give me your quick thoughts on the selection of Nick Herbig, and more specifically, where you think his best fit is. Because Dave and I have discussed a lot, and you kind of hear a change in tone from Omar Khan, Andy Weidel to compare it to Denzel Martin when the pick was made about, is he an inside guy? Is he an outside guy, an edge guy in Pittsburgh's system? Where do you think his best fit is, and can he, make it work out on the edge if Pittsburgh wants to play him there?
And this will be a good study for you because you're coaching outside linebackers, right?
Yes, I am.
All right, so this will be a good little kind of study for you right out of the chute, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. He's an interesting guy. I mean, I think obviously you watch the tape, the get-offs there in terms of pass rush. I think you guys kind of hit the nail on the head a lot of times talking about it on this podcast with, that the length and ability to set edges in the run game, particularly, in Pittsburgh, 3-4 scheme, they ask the linebackers to box a lot of those blocks, and, he gets overtaken on the run game. Now you're asking your corners and safeties to come make tackles, in the alley and out on the edge. And, a lot of their scheme is predicated on, those bigger frame players being able to do that. I really liked your idea, Alex, of using him as more of a, interior rusher from an off-ball position. Kind of, he doesn't have to necessarily be an every down outside linebacker for him to be a pass rush package player. And I think that's a lot of what I see in him is 4-phase special teamer, a guy that you can use his strengths. You can line him up in a B gap and stunt him somewhere, but you want to use his ability to move quickly, to, knife through blocks, to attack running backs in isolated matchups. I think that's the area. As far as ability to potential develop into, a true inside backer off ball, I think there's some baseline coverage ability there. I think obviously, it's probably tough to say, hey, day one, just, go play a 3-4 inside linebacker for 40 snaps for us. But I think that's something that for me, I'm probably looking to work him for year 2 to potentially compete for a job there. But I think year 1, if you want anything out of him, it's probably put him in a specific pass rush oriented package on 3rd and medium to 3rd and long, and kind of let him help you there, because I think his best trait is just his ability to consistently win as a pass rusher. And, a lot of his sacks at Wisconsin even do come from stunts and movement.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm with you. Joe Clark, your thoughts on where this team will use him and where this team should use Nick Herbig?
Yeah, so I'm kind of with Owen. I think they're going to, year 1, he's probably going to, I think they're going to stick him mostly at edge, just to kind of use that transition coming from college where he was an edge last season to get something out of him, because right now it's really a position he needs still is that backup edge stuff. But long term, he's got to be off ball. There's nobody with his arm size that's been a productive NFL player for like an extended period of time. I looked up guys with 31 and a quarter inch arms, and like Marcus Golden was really the only 31-inch arms that stuck at a legitimate edge position full time that has had, some moderate level of NFL success. And Herbig just not. Golden's got a lot more mass on him than Herbig does too. I love the pick of Herbig. He has a great personality. He's the hearts and smarts that I look for, but I just don't love it long term as an edge. I think, he starts out fine. They need edge depth. They can use him. They can scheme him into certain packages to kind of take advantage of what he's really good at. the position, but long term, he's got to be considered to be an off ball.
One name that has had NFL success despite really poor length is one of Dave's guys, actually. Carl Lawson has like 31.5-inch arms, but I think to Joe's point, Lawson is a more bigger built player. So Dave, I know we've discussed a lot our thoughts on Herbig. I'm going to guess probably everyone else has the same thought on him, but what do you think this team actually does with Herbig? Do you think they really keep him as an edge guy, or do you think this kind of floating about inside linebacker becomes true sooner than later?
Yeah, and I think somebody sent through the email machine too to look at Kyle Van Noy, because we recently talked about Kyle. I think PFF had him as a somebody that the Steelers should potentially look at moving on past the draft here if they want to add some experience, another experienced edge rusher here. And let's see, pulling up Kyle Van Noy's measurables from the combine. 6'031" was his height, so I think that's 1 inch taller than Herbig is. 243 weight, I think that's like 3 pounds more than at least what I think Herbig was listed at in college. The arm length, 31 5/8. And what did we say Herbig is?
31 1/4.
31 1/4. So, a little bit of difference there. Look, here's the thing. If he can become a Kyle Van Noy type player in the NFL, then you're going to be looking back at this pick saying, wow, what a deal they what a find they got with this kid when they got him in the 4th round there. Maybe that's high side projection. Maybe that's good side, projection if he can become that. But I think it's pretty evident, at least right out of the chute, because we were all wondering which coach is going to go into that room, especially with Curry being at that Wisconsin Pro Day there. I've gone back and forth. I've looked at several of his sacks and all like that. He has great hand usage. His get off you can definitely recognize that get off. I just wonder how that size goes back to kind of what Owen said. What's going to happen with him initially right out of the chute too when he's not rushing the passer. Right. Is he going to be able to stand up on that edge and turn things back inside or make plays? I mean, he could obviously chase down from the backside. We see that on his tape. A lot of hustle there when it comes to that. If they're going to make a transition with him to inside linebacker, I would expect it to be a slow process overall. But within all this, by looking more at his tape and looking at this depth chart right now, I do think that they need to bring in another more experienced edge, potentially like a Van Noy if they can get him on the cheap. Because I think even if their plan is to keep Herbig at the edge for the rest of the time there's going to be growing pains within this. I think, they talked to, who was it? Weidel said we think he'll get bigger naturally and grow into that. Well, that doesn't happen overnight, and, just getting acclimated to everything that comes with the position outside of rushing the passer alone is going to take something to get used to. So, short term, I think, through rookie minicamp and obviously OTAs and probably on into training camp, you're probably going to see him on the edge for them to get a good feel on him. And then I guess it's kind of a to be determined after that point.
It's a fair thought on, can he do the other things that aren't rushing the passer? In Pittsburgh, you have to earn the right to rush the passer, a.k.a. you got to stop the run first. And so that'll be the thought. I actually really like that comparison with Van Noy because he's a guy that's been really scheme versatile in his career. He's played off ball, he's played inside, he's played on the edge, he's kind of, played in different systems. So, yeah, I kind of, if he can become Kyle Van Noy, sign me up today.
Oh, absolutely. And when we get to the email portion of the show, I'll have it pulled up of who actually sent that in to look at there. But if you look at what Kyle Van Noy has done throughout, for he's played in the league,
almost a decade, probably.
Yeah, a decade. So if you got a guy to stick with you for a decade, that makes that a monumental pick in and of itself, regardless of where he plays. And to this point right now, Kyle Van Noy has 33 and a half career regular season snaps. We talked about him just the other day. Over the course of the last 5 years, I think he's averaged 5.25 sacks per season. He's like an average of 700 defensive snaps a season over the course of the last 5. So now he didn't come out of shoot right away, obviously, to be a big time player. And, perhaps that's the course that a guy like Herbig would have to make too, because I'm looking at, 2014, 15, and 16. Van Noy had a total of 3 sacks, it looks like here. And he really didn't start getting into his own until that first full season with the Patriots there, and obviously had a good 3-year run with the Patriots. So once again, you don't want to entirely close the book on this guy totally, but I mean, based on the measurables and his strengths and his weaknesses coming out of Wisconsin, it looks like a tall task. Mm-hmm. But if he can become a Kyle Van Noy in the NFL, I'm with you. You sign me up for it right now.
Josie, I want to go to you, and again, kind of a bigger picture question. Which of the 7 draft picks, which rookie will have the biggest impact on the 2023 Pittsburgh Steelers? And it feels like there's several candidates to choose from, but if you had to pick one, who will make the biggest mark on this present year team, who do you think it'll be?
I think it's going to be Darnell Washington, and I think it's going to be because of the way the Steelers want to play offense. They want to play bully ball. They want to just run it down teams' throats. And I think not only can he help out in the receiving game, but he's going to provide so much blocking wise. I mean, Zach Gentry isn't an awful blocker as a tight end, but Washington is way, way better than him. And I think the second close answer for this would be Joey Porter. I think he could also have a huge impact, but I do think there might be a little bit more of a learning curve than for Washington, who might simply just kind of be asked mostly to block. And he's proven that he can block really well. So I think for the offense that the Steelers seem they want to run, which is run the ball 30 times a game, I think having Washington in there and 2 tight end sets can be huge and maybe lead to more explosive runs, which is something the Steelers have. While they showed that they could run the ball last year, they didn't have too many explosive runs. And I think bringing Washington in might make some more explosive runs happen.
They really need that, no question about that. I'll ask the same question to all of you guys. To the other Joe Clark, your thought on the rookie that'll make the biggest impact on the 2023 Pittsburgh Steelers.
If he can beat out Dan Moore for the job, it'll be Broderick Jones. I think ultimately he will, but he's really got to improve his hand, like Tom says, hand usage, just hand placement, because kind of dangles his arms at his hips and pass sets, especially with his first kick step. If you watch his LSU tape, he got smoked by BJ Ojolari when he was doing that. But I think it's going to be Jones if he can beat out Dan Moore. Otherwise, it's got to be Porter Jr. I think. I mean, the Steelers need cornerback help. They're going to have a third cornerback in the field at times, even if he's technically the third outside on the depth chart behind Wallace and Pat Pete. I think, just his length, the way he's going to be able to take away those slants, a lot of those in-breaking routes. Even if he doesn't, provide a ton of splash as a rookie, I think he's going to just be enough of a nuisance, and that I think he's going to have a pretty positive impact. I mean, you still have to be worried about, him being grabby and the penalties, but I think right now I'd probably go, assuming that, let's just say Dan Moore Jr. wins the job, I'd go Porter Jr. Otherwise, I think Broderick Jones is just good or bad. If you have a different left tackle, I think it's going to impact the team positively if he ends up, fixing some of his issues and plays well, or negatively if he can't and the Steelers offense line suffers. But so I think it's going to be one of those top 2 picks.
Owen, your choice for most impactful Steelers rookie?
Yeah. So I agree with points that, both of them made. I think Washington, I just don't think the snap count will be there for him to be that guy where he's the most impactful out of them. But I think there's potential for him to obviously boost the red zone offense. And then, if they really want to become that 12 personnel team, him just kind of allowing them to do that, by default could make him an extremely impactful player. I would tend to probably agree on Jones. I mean, I think if he comes out and, immediately takes that job from Dan Moore, I thought Dan Moore did a really nice job in terms of some zone run blocking late in the season, but you still see too many instances of him just getting burnt by a speed rusher off the edge with just that like instant pressure. And, I think there was a lot of that where it's not like his consistency is not terrible, but the bad reps are bad and like can lead to early sacks. And I think with Jones, I had a chance to look a little bit into Jones. I think obviously the ability to get out in space and, move on screens and, kind of get to the second level as a run blocker. But I think especially as a pass protector on that blind side, he just does a really nice job to match feet. And, I think that's really where if you can get more pass protection for Kenny, I think that opens, more opportunities to attack downfield and ultimately get to the version of this offense where that wants to go. I think Porter Jr. also super impactful. I just think, probably limited to more of a sub package role. I don't think, they just give him the job day one,
Mm-hmm.
but if he's, able to come in and, play big snaps, I think his ability to play the boundary and, really eliminate number one options could be something that shows up immediately.
And Tom, your thoughts on the most impactful Pittsburgh Steelers rookie?
Well, I just want to add this with the about Washington. I think he opens up a lot for Pat Freiermuth to play more in the slot, more on his feet, especially in that goal line package where they use the two inline tight ends and the two guys on the wings. Freiermuth's probably going to move from inline to that wing position. That gives him a lot more flexibility to be a red zone threat in that formation. But to answer your question, I'm going to go with Keanu Benton. The run defense of this team has been a work in progress for a couple years. To add a big body, athletic guy in the middle who can keep the new linebackers clean, it's putting him with Larry O and Hayward should form a nice trio up the middle. He probably won't start right away, but he'll earn those reps as the season goes on, and he could be a very impactful player in the passing game and the run game, but especially in the run game.
Yeah, I'm with you, Tom. Dave, any questions for these guys?
Yeah, Tom, have you, obviously you weren't out at the Shrine Bowl, but I would imagine you watched some Spencer Anderson tape since the draft. What are your thoughts on the Steelers' last draft pick?
I watched a little bit on him, and he fits the mold of what they've been looking for in recent years. The guys that are flexible, the guys that have the length, the mobility. He's played up and down the offensive line, so I think he'll get, probably not at tackle, but probably looks at all three spots inside. He's the backup center job is wide open, and they've brought in like 15 guys now that are going to take a look at that spot. So, it fits what they've been looking for. And they had the good connections with Maryland. So I'm curious to see, how he handles the camp and, if he can take a hold of that job.
And where do you come in on the Nick Herbig evaluation positionally?
So I wasn't happy with the pick initially. They need depth at outside linebacker and they needed depth at inside linebacker. And frankly, they don't know if he can do either. It's possible. I kind of put him in the same bucket as Connor Hayward. He's a football player and he's going to do whatever you ask him to do at 100%. He'll be given a chance on the edge. And, there's a couple positives that could come out of that. They could see, yes, he can handle the pass rushing there and he could stick there. he could also not have success there and, then be able to totally commit to inside linebacker. I think he's going to be used as a movable piece down the road. Hopefully he'll be able to. I think he's going to be able to stick it inside linebacker. He's got the speed, the smarts, the athleticism. He was solid in coverage at Wisconsin, dropping into zone coverage. So I think he'll be able to handle that, and I think that'll be his spot. And he could become that inside blitzer like Vince Williams was, and just wreak havoc on passing downs as well. So I think eventually it's going to be an inside spot, but they're going to give him a look at both areas.
Owen, I need your help because I think the thing that I wrestled with the most trying to project what the week 1 depth chart lineups will look like is Pittsburgh sub package, and specifically who will be the Pittsburgh Steelers slot corner. And I don't know really who that guy is, at least on passing downs. Rundowns, it may still be Maulet. They signed Chandon Sullivan. Of course, you have kind of your big three on the outside in Peterson, Wallace, Porter. How do all those pieces fit? Who do you think is going to be the first 3rd and 7 snap of the season? Who's going to be playing inside in the slot?
Yeah, so I think what my thought has been for the traditional nickel spot, I think you're looking at Porter Jr. on the outside, Levi Wallace also on the outside, probably playing sides because Pittsburgh doesn't really love to do field boundary or matchup. And I think you're probably going to have Patrick Peterson slide to the inside. I think there's a couple reasons for that. Obviously not something he's done a ton in his career, but I think just in terms of being able to replace a lot of what Cam Sutton did from that spot with the inverted coverages, with the veteran IQ that it takes to play that spot in Pittsburgh, I think Patrick Peterson's a good guy for that spot. And, I guess really in terms of out of the three of them with Porter Jr., Levi Wallace, and him, he's probably the best suited to play that in terms of just IQ, fluidity. And then you look at the other options that they have there, you're not going to roll into week 1, I don't think, and throw out Arthur Maulet or Chandon Sullivan on a third down. I think the other spot that becomes interesting is that kind of dime backer spot because, as we know, they like to put 6 DBs out in those 3rd and long. So, Sutton did some of that in Pittsburgh. He was able to move in. I think what I would expect is probably some variation of 3 corners and 3 safeties in those spots where you can play both Minka and KZ further from the line of scrimmage, maybe move a guy like, Neal into that spot closer to the line of scrimmage as more of, a blitzer and, covering. They do a lot of that hug blitzing on the running backs. But I think to answer your question in short, I would expect Patrick Peterson to be a guy that is lining up over the slot on passing downs.
How confident are you in that? I probably agree with that because at this point, I'm just trying to find the best of the not great options. But obviously, this is a guy that's never really done that. He's always kind of been an outside type corner. And you wonder how well he's going to match up against maybe some of those smaller slot receivers on the inside.
I feel good about it in terms of his ability to get the flat foot reads going on out routes and slants and, stuff in the intermediate areas. What I worry about is teams looking to exploit that matchup knowing, okay, Pittsburgh plays a lot of cover 1. What if we get him isolated in the slot, run a hitch on the outside, and then get that slot fade going from number 2? And I think that's where teams are going to try to exploit him is, the deep outbreaking routes where you can get him isolated and that midfield safety is not going to be able to get there in time. What makes that easier now, again, is, with a guy like him, you can say, okay, well, shade to outside leverage. You got Minka playing over the post. As long as you force an inside release, he's not going to be able to stem outside and get to Minka. So I think Peterson's veteran smarts and ability and his ability to work in tandem with Minka and a lot of that stuff they play should help him to survive in those situations. But from what I saw on tape, the long speed isn't exactly there to, let's say he's got to run with like Jamar Chase in the slot or something. Like that's not the matchup we want. That's not ideal. And actually, interestingly enough, Shrine Bowl guy, I think Zay Flowers in Baltimore now is another guy that I'd be very worried about getting some slot matchups against him.
Yeah, for sure. Dave, go ahead.
Let's wind it down this way. We've talked about all the draft picks. We got a good idea about let's go this way. Of the undrafted guys, the 7 that they signed, each of you real quickly name one guy that you're most excited to see moving forward into the offseason. Whoever wants to start. Joe Clark.
I'm intrigued by Jay. I don't want to say his name. Nyamwaya. I mean, he's local to me. He's from Merrimack, so I don't know, like an hour away. Put up pretty good numbers for a team that was actually pretty solid in the FCS last season, and they had just recently transitioned to D1 a few years ago. So to have that level of success at FCS is pretty impressive. We led the team in sacks. He's got the size Pittsburgh looks for, and there's definitely, there could be a spot on the practice squad. There's a role for him maybe at the bottom of the roster as additional defensive line depth. The little tape that I've seen on him, I was pretty impressed by. I like Jonathan's breakdown of him. He just seems like a humble kid, a hard worker. I'm definitely, he's the guy I'm probably most, him and Monty Pottebaum, just because he's looks cool as hell. But he's definitely one name that I'm really intrigued by. I'm excited to watch minicamp this weekend and hopefully down the line in training camp.
Joe C, who are you most excited of these undrafted 7?
I'm interested to see David Perales, and I think it's because one, the edge depth at with the Steelers right now is just not good, and he has some. In 2 seasons he has 16.5 sacks at Fresno State. So he has the production. He's 6'3". I feel like he could be someone if he can make the roster, but just based off the lack of edge depth, I think that's an intriguing player to watch.
Tom Mead.
I'll go with Tanner Morgan. He had some success at Minnesota, had some injury issues. This year was up and down. He's a little undersized, but that number 3 quarterback position is open, which isn't really important. But when you consider that the backup quarterback might be gone after this year, you're going to need someone behind Kenny Pickett. So, seeing what this kid can do and how he processes at the NFL level is going to be important.
Owen?
To me, it just has to be Pottenbaum, just given the current state of the roster with, if you're not going to bring Watt back, Hayward's a fun guy to play around with and do some stuff with, but I don't think he's, a prototype fullback that you want to line up and, play in the role of just pure lead blocker for however many snaps they want to do that. I think the guy's got some interesting special teams value just in terms of being a physical guy that wants to, go out there and hit people. And then, obviously it's never going to be too bad if you get to see a guy with a mullet catching the ball in the flat.
All right, let's go this way now. Now the draft is over with, and you got a good idea of how this 90-man roster is starting to shape up. What's one position? Each of you identify one position that you think still needs to be addressed with a potential veteran experienced player moving forward on into the rest of the offseason. Joe Clark. It's
got to be edge. Who's the third edge right now? Is it Herbig? Is it really going to be Quincy Roche? It's a position that we saw last year when Walt went down, and Malik Reed couldn't get it done. Jameer Jones couldn't get it done. It's an important position to have depth at, and right now the depth is questionable at best. So, adding a veteran like Kyle Van Noy, finding another veteran out there, I think that's probably the most important position to address right now.
Joe C?
Yeah, I'm with edge too, just because, we saw how bad it was last year when Watt went down, and it was Highsmith and Reed was trying to figure out how to play edge over there. It just was a disaster without Watt, and if God forbid either Watt or Highsmith go down this season, you need to have someone who's capable of playing edge in Pittsburgh there, or else the defense is going to be looking really bad again.
Tom Mead.
Yeah, outside linebacker is a good choice, but I'll switch it up and go inside. They've revamped that entire room, and you're one play away from having Mark Robinson or Tanner Muse have to start for an extended period of time. And nothing against those guys, but that's not what you'd hope for for the depth at that position. So I think looking for a veteran to play inside is going to be key.
Coach Owen Straley.
I would have to go with what me and Alex were just talking about with slot corner. I think you got a lot of guys who are 6'1", 6'2", long and lengthy in that room, but you still kind of lack that pure coverage guy in the slot who can give you a little bit of run defense, be a little more well-rounded and just be able to match quicker guys from the inside playing from depth. Just I guess a real experienced player in there. There's no one in that group who's done it. So maybe addressing that at some point with somebody who becomes available, maybe even in camp, would be interesting.
Alex Kahn.
Well, I wanted to know if Owen goes by just Coach Owen. He seems like the cool coach, the one everybody can be friends with. He's not Coach Straley, he's just Coach Owen. Is that how it goes?
And maybe I might be Coach O, Coach Ogeron.
Coach O, yeah.
Although Alex, you answer my question.
You got to be one of the LSU guys, Coach O, down there on the bayou. I was going to. I think the answer in terms of like what is the biggest hole on this roster right now is slot corner. I don't think there's really a veteran out there today that can solve that. Of course, they just brought in one in Chandon Sullivan, so I think post-camp cutdowns, a late trade, something like that might be the fix. I think the Steelers are going to be in for a rude awakening of how much value Cam Sutton brought to them, the Band-Aid that he was to plug basically any hole needed because he could play basically any spot in that secondary, whether it's post-snap rotation, slot corner, outside corner. I mean, he did it all for this team, and I am worried this team's going to go down that 2021 path again where they really didn't have a good slot corner plan. It was Maulet, it was Antoine Brooks. None of those guys worked out. They tried Minka early in the year. He was uncomfortable there, did not perform well there. They moved him back and eventually basically just kind of kicked Sutton inside. This time, obviously, Sutton's not going to be that option. So slot corner to me is the biggest need. I would probably agree, though, that there's going to be more veteran options at edge to add somebody to that mix because there probably really aren't any names at slot corner right now.
No more questions, Your Honor. The defense rests, and I hope the Steelers defense gets to rest quite a bit in 2023 as well, too. Alex?
Yeah, thank you guys so much. I think it's all that Dave and I had, so we'll definitely have you guys on maybe later in the summer as we get ready towards training camp and towards the start of the regular season. So always appreciate your time. Be sure to follow these guys and just want to thank them again for the fantastic work they did throughout the draft process. I felt like we as a site and me in particular were so prepared for this draft because of all the work that we put in ahead of time, whether it was your guys' coverage at the All-Star games or the scouting reports or the film room breakdowns that you guys have done. So just want to thank you guys again for the tremendous work and effort. I know they're long nights and, it feels nonstop, but thank you guys again for making me feel really prepared for this draft.
And I echo those comments as well.
All right, so we'll take a pause and come back with the rest of the show. And welcome back to the Terrible Podcast. And again, our special thanks to Joe C., Joe Clark, Owen, and Tom Mead for their time and their insight and a really good conversation there. And I really love getting their thoughts. And congrats again to Owen on the coaching job. I think it's going to be fantastic for him. And we're excited to watch his coaching career begin.
Absolutely. And we hope to have maybe one more post-draft roundtable with a couple of the other guys on the staff here, probably within the next, calendar week here to kind of get their thoughts on some of the same topics that we asked them about.
Yeah, definitely. I thought it was a really interesting question that you asked, Dave, and I want to get your thoughts. And also I do selfishly want to share my thoughts too. When you asked the question of what was the first thing you noticed about Broderick Jones? What was, whenever you watched him, what was the first thing you noticed about his game?
Yeah, and I think I put it out there on Twitter, just the overall athleticism, his ability to move, his ability to get off the line, get out in space, and keep his feet and make those key blocks out on the edges there, and kind of within that, his ability to in kind of some of those double hits off the line, those double teams, and when he's asked to go to the next level, his ability to quickly do that and get 2-3 yards off the ball like that. So just the overall athleticism, first and foremost, was the thing that jumped off the tape with me with him.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think that was something that's certainly notable and probably the most enticing part of his game. For me, I'll take it even kind of, I'll combine that thought with just something a little bit more base level. His stance, just watching him like get into a stance, how flexible he was, the bend that he showed. I know it's a small thing, but I think that kind of shows the athleticism and kind of rarity that he has in terms of just how his body moves, because he's a really flexible guy. Even if you watch, like whenever, Steelers.com or the YouTube channel would kind of give some clips of him, and they would show him pre-snap, get into a stance and get low and have just really good like knee bend and be able to drop his hips. I just don't see that from a lot of tackles. I know that's a kind of a very specific niche thing, but I think it highlights how flexible this guy is. When you watch him get into a stance, he's not tall, he's not tight. I mean, he's very loose, and I think that kind of just speaks to the athletic profile that he has.
Cameron Wolf from the NFL Network is now reporting there was a difference of opinion regarding Arthur Maulet's contract, and he asked for his release per source.
All right. I mentioned that because it did not make sense for Maulet, for the Steelers to want to release Arthur Maulet, because there was, why do it from a financial standpoint, from a depth standpoint, from what he did offer, special teams, rundown, nickel corner. So this makes a lot more sense if he's asking for his release.
Right. And, people are saying there sounds like some difference of opinion regarding his contract. He was, look, make no mistake about it. And the cap numbers reflect this, and as does the NFLPA site and all like that. He was under contract for 2023. That's why he's getting released.
Right.
There. So I don't know where the difference of opinion regarding his contract. I don't know. Maybe he thought he was going to get a chance to get an extension this offseason. I don't know. Maybe that's where the difference of opinion and all are in on that. But once again, you're not saving a lot of cap room in here, and there's always, as we had said with the Jameer Jones out of the blue, there's always probably something more to the story when it doesn't add up. And on the heels of this team signing Chandon Sullivan and adding a couple of cornerbacks via the draft, this does make the most sense here that Maulet said, look, I see what's going on here. I'm not going to be part of this. How about just cut me now?
Yeah, I'm literally typing that now on Twitter, because I don't know what contractual issue there could have been. It's not like he wanted an extension or deserved this, mega deal or anything to that sort. So I think it was just him saying, I'm probably not going to make this team, which I'm not even sure if it's accurate. I think he still had a chance to make this team, but I guess his perspective was different. So he wanted to go somewhere else to try to catch on before OTAs or training camps open up.
Here's the thing, and we've seen this before. A lot of things happen during the off season, right? And you never know. You might be slated for the practice squad and you end up on the 50. So many things happen. So there was probably a difference of opinion of where he thought maybe he belonged in the grand scheme of things, and seeing Chandon Sullivan be brought in, and then this team draft 2 cornerbacks. Maybe that was his difference of opinion.
Yeah, that makes a lot more sense than anything contractual. So that's my read of the situation. But to the point, Maulet's gone, Maulet's out, regardless if it was team driven or player driven. And now you have even more questions about what that slot room looks like.
The big winner here is Akella Witherspoon for the time being, right?
I guess, but he can't play in the slot. Right. So I think he's still got the same numbers game on the outside, because his team can't keep all outside corners,
That's true, but at least short term, because I kind of envision, by the time this team got to OTAs, that Witherspoon might not be on this roster.
He better get good on special teams, though, because we know Pierre can at least do it, and you got Porter, and Trice will have to earn that spot as well. But Witherspoon better get really good at running down kicks and punts.
How many snaps did Maulet play on special teams last year?
A lot. I think Wolf's tweet, and numbers can vary, but the tweet says he led the team in special teams tackles last year. I mean, he was, kick coverage guy. He was not out there on punts, so he was kind of mainly a kick guy in terms of coverage snaps.
Just 152 special team snaps, and that wasn't the most on their team. Couldn't have been.
Well, he said the stat was led the team in tackles on special teams, but I don't know if that's accurate either.
Yeah, let me see real quick.
The numbers get very sketchy in special teams tackles. They can kind of vary pretty wildly.
Well, the NFL official site, keeps those as a stat.
Okay.
So I'm going to pull those up for regular season.
I mean, he might have been there. I assume it's probably what Wolf is referencing, considering their NFL Network affiliate.
Miles Boykin had 10 total. Okay, Maulet had 13 total. So, okay, he did. He had 8 solos and 5 assists there for a total of 13. And second behind him would have been Marcus Allen with 8 solos and 4 assists at 12. And then Miles Boykin at 10. So that stat is correct of him having the most total special teams, when you add in, solos and assists.
That's another factor as well. All the turnover on special teams. Allen's gone. Snell appears to be gone. Derek Watt's gone. Maulet's now gone. That's a lot of core special team snaps that you're losing and replacing with, you bring back Boykin, which was, good to see. And Tanner Muse is going to be a core guy. And some of these rookies are going to catch on. Herbig, I think, will be a core guy out of the gate. So, but it's just another area of turnover that's going to be an adjustment for this team.
I would think Maulet, just off of special teams tape alone last season, will land somewhere, maybe for a tad bit more than a minimum.
Yeah, I think he'll be on a 53 somewhere come week 1. He'll definitely be in a camp, and you take it from there.
Right.
All right, Dave, I think we should get to some reader emails and close out today's show.
All right, let's do it here. We talked about this during the roundtable here. This was from Pastor Joe Green. He says, I think in year 2, Nick Herbig becomes a Kyle Van Noy kind of player, a spot starter that gets snaps at both outside linebacker and inside linebacker. He says, look at the measurables. Van Noy is my comp for Herbig. However, I agree he may end up with more snaps inside in the long run. There. All right, Pastor Joe, we addressed that during the roundtable there, and once again, if Nick Herbig can become the new Kyle Van Noy in the NFL and play 10 seasons on top of it and register the amount of sacks and do all the things Van Noy has done, sign us all up for that. Whether it's outside, inside, or whatever. But the measurables, I guess, are close there. So if you want to put a player in what would we call that? Kind of the variance the outlier category. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's fair to put Van Noy. Van Noy has always kind of looked a little bit bigger, though, even coming out, if I remember.
Yeah, it felt like he was bigger, but the heights and weights are pretty similar. And, Andy Weidel said, as you referenced, that Herbig will hopefully add some weight, and he probably will. So I like that Van Noy comparison. And as Dave said, if he can become Van Noy, then I'll sign up for that.
Sure. So good observation on your point, Pastor Joe Green. Let's see here. Let's go to C. Michael. Really appreciate the insights and perspective. And he has on, Benton question. Good point about his Senior Bowl. He says, you're my number one source for Steelers analysis and discussion. Really love the prospect breakdowns, blah, blah, blah. Today's question relates to whether our newfound big physical cornerbacks can be used to match up man versus man versus above average pass catching tight ends. He says, we're all aware of how our linebackers have been exploited by these types. He says, to me, it makes all the sense in the world rather than allowing these mismatches, possibly using, he says, Keanu, Neil Moore at strong safety versus teams with dual use tight ends to help offset the loss of run D size. Would say Trice near the line of scrimmage, ? What are your thoughts on possible ways the Steelers could utilize these new tools versus tight ends and the impact they could have?
Yeah, it's a fair question. I think Trice is more likely to do it than Joey Porter's going to do it, given that Porter's going to have probably a more impactful role covering, outside type receivers. And Trice has that safety background that probably has him a bit more comfortable working interior, middle of the field, and taking on some of these tight ends. So, yeah, I think Trice is a guy that could try to, Pittsburgh's tried that in the past with some of these, matchups against Gronk. I know Cortez Allen is one of those guys, for better or for worse. So, yeah, short answer, I think Trice could be that guy. But you get them into camp. They got to make the team first. They got to do all the little things and stay healthy, stay available, and you take it from there. So I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves. I do view Trice as a cornerback, but you take advantage of kind of the size that he has and how I think he could match up well against some of these, big move flex type of tight ends.
Let's see. David Ricards writes in, I feel like the fan base have good reason to be excited about the draft class, but maybe getting slightly ahead of ourselves. He says, particularly with Washington. He says, I love the Darnell Washington pick, but I find myself wondering what his snap count projects to be in year one, particularly early in the season. He says, I would expect it to be higher than the tight end 2 snaps that Gentry saw last season, but is that a reasonable expectation? He says, is tight end a position that tends to take some time for the rookie to get worked into the scheme? He says, I'm trying to remember how the team handled Pat Freiermuth's reps as a rookie, though the situation is obviously different this year. As always, thanks to the Depot crew. He says the roundtables this year have been awesome. Thanks, David. Here's the way I view Darnell Washington's possible early inclusion into the season. You have him do all of, if not the same things he was asked to do at Georgia. There, a lot of end of the line scrimmage type stuff. Maybe put him in motion occasionally, and some misdirection, kind of those tight end quick. Roll out screens to one side off of play action. And then obviously you can use them in the run game as a blocker there. What would be an early, this far out, assuming once again, everybody stays healthy, what would be an early snap projection for a season for Darnell Washington offensively? 450 snaps?
How many did Gentry play last year, just to kind of give me a baseline answer? Let me look that up here, at least based off of PFR. They have him down for 577.
Okay, and Freiermuth did miss a little bit of time there, right?
Right, with the concussions. But obviously he may miss this year too. But I guess we'll assume, Freiermuth plays all 17 games, is in great health in 2023. Obviously things are a bit dependent on, are you winning games? Are you losing games? Obviously if you're up late, you're running your 4-minute offense, you're going to be putting out your big people to close out a game. If you're down, you got 11 personnel, you're going pass mode, and so snap counts are going to go down. So there's a game circumstance element to it. I think on paper, you would expect a guy like Washington to play more than what Gentry was playing last year, just because he's a better player and this team's real all-in philosophy on some of that bully ball action. Although to go the other way, this team will probably have a more competent slot receiver and third receiver this year in Allen Robinson, as opposed to the mess there was last year, especially post-Claypool trade. So, you're going to vary up your personnel some. So short answer, I'll say about the same number of snaps as Gentry last year. I'll call it between 500 to 600.
All right, but if everybody stays healthy here, and you come out with the intention of running more 12 personnel out of the chute, you damn sure better have Washington on the field, is my view.
Oh, yeah, and I think that he will be. And to answer the other question of the transition for rookie tight ends, typically I think it's a pretty steep learning curve. I think it's one of the steeper learning curves for rookies to have, probably right behind quarterback. But for Washington being so comfortable working inline 3-point stance as a run blocker, because that's typically where the transition comes from, because you got these big flex tight ends that never put their hand in the ground, never have to block a guy in college. That's the learning curve. It's not going to be an issue for Washington. So I think his learning curve will be, playing in a pro style offense, much less severe than a typical rookie tight end.
I agree. And like I said, you focus on the things that he's already good at and did quite a bit at Georgia, and then build off of that, elements of the passing game and things of that nature there. But I think undoubtedly you can get this guy on the field early, especially if your intentions is to run, and look, I mean, it gives you ability to what I've said several times over the years on this podcast. You put a 12 personnel grouping out there that includes Washington and Freiermuth. You can look across that line of scrimmage and see, are you going up against a heavy defense or are you going up against a light defense? And you can split Freiermuth out.
Yeah, to quote Michael Scott, poorly, but I'll try to quote him here. My oh my, how the turns
my,
the table.
how the turntables.
Right. It's because it used to be that Pittsburgh would get killed on that stuff.
Right.
Cleveland did it all the time against them. They would go heavy. Pittsburgh would stay in base because they had to stay in base. Then you go empty out of your heavy personnel and you just pick Pittsburgh apart. Maybe Pittsburgh can put that shoe on the other foot this year. I would love to see that.
And look, if this guy ends up being as good as a inline number 2 tight end as we all think and hope he will be, and just anything that you're able to build off of that with him in the passing game is just gravy. And as I showed in my contextualization of him recently of his targets, it's not bad. It's not like he caught a lot of 3-yard passes down the field there. He was able to catch the football down the field, and more than anything, the red zone ability there. You can do a lot of tricky things with him in some 12 personnel groupings, along with Freiermuth. Based on what you see across from you and all like that down in the red zone. And he is even though he didn't have a lot of touchdown production in college inside the red zone, it's hard to, you could just lob that thing up over the line of scrimmage up high and let him go get it,
Yeah, and it was tough for him to be an ultra productive guy when you're playing in a pro style system, runs the ball a lot, and of course Brock Bowers is going to be the tight end and best tight end of the class next year. So it's hard to get that production consistently. So you bet on traits, you bet on tools, and Washington has both of those things. Right.
And I guess a short answer to his question would be, I don't think the transition for how I think they might want to use him out of the chute would be tough on a player like Washington.
What's your projected snap count? I was in that 500, 600 range. Are you probably about the same?
Yeah, 450 was the first number that came up in my head, but I mean, it could easily be 650.
Mm-hmm. I got you.
Right.
Also, just seeing this Arthur Maulet Instagram post, and these are always hard to suss out, but I'll just read what he posted here just a short time ago. It says, quote, "I'm very thankful for everything, but I won't sell my soul to change what I believe in. They're going to paint the picture like I'm tripping." And so that is from an Instagram story of Arthur Maulet from just a couple minutes ago. Obviously not specifying what that means, but it sounds like he was dissatisfied with something happening in Pittsburgh.
Okay. I'm not sure what to read into that, but that's quite interesting.
Yeah, always. And Brooke Pryor's reporting that Maulet did ask for his release. So just to confirm that.
All right.
All right. Anything else from the emo machine, Dave?
No, I think we've got everything when it comes to that, and we will be back at it on Friday after the schedule release, right?
Yay, the schedule release, yep. And then Friday will be day 1 of rookie minicamp. And so it's going to be a busy weekend with a lot of interviews, hearing from the rookie class. It's going to be a lot of fun.
All right. Sorry, I'm trying to get some news out here.
Yeah, it's a busy time here.
Real quick here. All right. So until Friday, you can follow me on Twitter at Steelers Depot. Follow Alex on Twitter at Alex_Kozora. Follow the show at Terrible Podcast. Email the show, theterriblepodcast@gmail.com. If you like what we do and want to donate to the cause, SteelersDepot.com. Hit the donate button, upper right navigational bar. Also, if you like an ad-free version of the site, SteelersDepot.com. Hit the ad-free button, upper right navigational bar, and follow the directions that way. Great roundtable today. Shout out to all the guys for joining us. We hope to have another one here probably within the next calendar week. Good job by you, Alex, as well, too. So until Friday, as always, thanks for listening to the Terrible Podcast with Dave and Alex.